Hello, everyone. Welcome to Learn English Podcast.
My first night. Learn English through story. My name is Alina, and tonight is my first night as a married woman. Yet I do not even know the man who now calls himself my husband. And as I sit on the edge of the bed in a room that feels both strange and suffocating, my heart beats like a drum, my hands tremble, and I wonder how my life has changed so suddenly. For just yesterday, I was a daughter in my parents' home, a girl with dreams of study, freedom, and the possibility of choosing her own path. And now, I am a wife, bound to a man whose face I had only seen briefly during the ceremony, a man whose name sounds familiar, only because everyone around me kept whispering it, reminding me again and again that he is now my future, my responsibility, and my fate. And as I try to breathe calmly, I remember how quickly everything happened, how my mother's eyes were filled with both pride and sadness, how my father's silence felt heavier than any words, and how my friends' laughter outside the house during the wedding celebration sounded so far away, as if I was trapped behind a glass wall, watching life move on without me. And I wonder if this is what it means to grow up, to be pushed into a situation you never asked for, but must endure because society, family, and tradition have chosen it for you. And even though my lips smiled during the wedding, inside my chest was a storm of questions, doubts, and fears. And now, here in this room, those questions scream louder, echoing against the silence of the walls. Why him? Why me? Why now? And will I ever feel like myself again? Or have I already lost the girl I used to be? And as these thoughts flood my mind, I glance toward the man, my husband, who sits across the room, removing his jacket slowly, carefully, as if he too is unsure how to act. And I realize that maybe he is also a stranger to this situation. Maybe he is just as nervous. Maybe he also feels the weight of expectations pressing on his shoulders. And for a brief moment, I wonder if beneath his calm expression hides a heart that trembles like mine. And this thought comforts me just a little, but not enough to stop the tears that began to blur my vision. Silent tears I wipe away quickly so that he does not see, because I do not want him to know how fragile I feel, how lost I am. And as I sit there, trapped between fear and hope, I began to think about the meaning of marriage, about the idea of two strangers becoming partners overnight, about how a piece of paper and a few words can tie two lives together. And I wonder if love can grow in soil that has not been watered by choice, but by obligation. And as these thoughts circle endlessly in my mind, I hear his voice for the first time tonight, soft but firm, asking if I am comfortable. And the sound startles me, not because of the words themselves, but because of the kindness hidden inside them. And for a moment, I do not know how to respond. My lips frozen, my throat dry, and then I simply nod, whispering yes, though my heart screams no, because I am not comfortable, not in this dress, not in this room, not in this new life. And yet I tell myself that maybe, just maybe, if I keep breathing, if I keep listening, I will find a way to survive this night. And as I look around the room, I notice details I had ignored before. The curtains heavy and red, the bed decorated with flowers that smelled too sweet, the candles flickering as if nervous like me, and the silence between us thick like smoke. And I realized that this night will not just be a night of a marriage, it will be the first chapter of a story I never planned to write. A story that may lead me to love or to heartbreak, or perhaps to something in between. And even though I do not know him, even though I do not know myself fully, I know that this night will mark me forever. And so I breathe again, deeper this time, trying to calm the storm inside. And I wait, because sometimes waiting is all you can do when life writes the story for you. And in the waiting, I feel both fear and courage, because though I did not choose this, I am still alive. I am still me. And maybe, just maybe, I will find a way to turn this strange beginning into something meaningful, something worth remembering, or at least something I can endure without breaking. And as my eyes meet his for the first time with honesty, not as a bride pretending to be happy, but as a woman unsure of her fate, I realize that he too is searching for answers. And in that shared uncertainty, perhaps we are not as alone as we feel. Perhaps two strangers can walk this unknown path together, step by step, word by word, night by night. The room grew quieter as the hours stretched, and the candles flickered lower, their flames dancing like shy secrets, and I could hear only the soft rhythm of my own breath mixed with his. Two strangers breathing in the same air, two lives now tied together by words we barely spoke. And I thought of how strange it is that life can turn with such speed, one day filled with familiar laughter and the next heavy with silence. And as I sat there, I began to think of him not as a husband, not as a stranger, but simply as another human being. Someone who might have fears like mine, someone who might be wondering what I was thinking, someone who might also feel trapped between duty and desire. And that thought softened me further, because sometimes when you see another person not as a role, but as a soul, the distance between you shrinks, even if only a little. And I remembered the way he looked during the ceremony, his eyes not fixed on me, but lost somewhere else, as though he too was walking through memories. And I wondered what he had given up to be here, what dreams had been set aside for the sake of this marriage. And in that wondering, I felt less alone, because suddenly it was not just my story of sacrifice, it was also his. And that meant that maybe we could build something new together, not out of romance written in fairy tales, but out of shared humanity, shared effort, and shared time. Because love, I realized, is not always fireworks. Sometimes it is simply choosing to stay, to listen, to be present. And as I stole a glance at him again, I noticed the way his hands rested on his knees. Strong hands, but still, as if holding back their own restlessness. And I thought of how those hands might build a life, might carry burdens, might also one day reach for mine with tenderness. And though I did not know him, though I had not chosen him, in that moment I chose to believe in possibility. Because without possibility, there is only despair. And I could not let despair become my companion on this first night. And so I told myself to breathe again, to watch, to wait, to listen, to give both of us space to grow into whatever this marriage would become. And as the silence stretched on, he finally spoke again, not about love, not about duty, but about something simple, asking if I liked music. And the question surprised me, not because of its content, but because of its simplicity, its normality. And I smiled faintly for the first time that night, realizing that sometimes the heaviest nights can be softened by the lightest words. And I answered softly that yes, I liked music. And when he asked me what kind, I told him about the songs I used to listen to when I studied, songs that carried me into dreams of freedom. And as I spoke, my voice trembled, but also grew steadier, because speaking about something I loved reminded me that I was still me, still Alina, not just a bride, not just a wife, but a young woman with dreams, tastes, and stories. And when he nodded and said he also liked music, that he played the guitar sometimes, I felt the small spark of connection, fragile but real. And I thought that maybe this was how two strangers could begin to know each other, not through grand declarations, but through small exchanges, through simple truths shared in quiet rooms. And though I still feared the light, still feared the weight of tomorrow, I felt for the first time that maybe this story did not have to be one of tragedy. Maybe it could be one of slow growth, of gradual trust, of learning step by step what it means to share life with another. And as I closed my eyes briefly, listening to the silence after our words, I realized that sometimes the first night is not about answers at all. It is about learning how to ask the right questions. And in that realization, I felt a fragile kind of hope rise within me, like the first light of dawn touching the edge of darkness. The night deepened, and though the world outside had quieted, inside me 1,000 thoughts refused to rest, swirling between fear and curiosity, duty and desire. But as I looked at him again, sitting there across from me, I realized that the distance between us was not just physical, it was emotional. A distance shaped by years of living separate lives, by growing up with different dreams, different experiences. And yet, here we were, expected to erase all that distance in a single night. And the impossibility of that thought almost made me laugh. Because how can anyone truly know another person in a moment, in a single day, in a single night? And yet, that is what marriage had asked of us. That is what family and tradition had demanded. But maybe, I thought, maybe the truth is that no one ever knows another person fully, not even after years. And marriage is not about instant knowing, but about endless learning. And with that thought, my fear softened again. Because learning I could do. Learning was something I had always loved. And if I looked at him not as a stranger forced upon me, but as a lesson, as a story unfolding, then maybe I could walk this path with less resistance. And as that realization settled in me, he asked another question, this time about my childhood. And though his voice was calm, I could sense that he was not merely making conversation, he was searching too, searching for something familiar in me, something human that could anchor him in this strange new chapter. And so I answered honestly, telling him about the small town where I grew up, about the fields I used to run through, about the way my mother's voice would call me back home as the sun set. And as I spoke, I saw his expression soften, as if my memories painted colors he too could see. And when he told me about his own childhood, about the rivers he used to swim in, about the books he hid under his bed so he could read at night when everyone thought he was sleeping, I found myself smiling, really smiling, because suddenly he was no longer just my husband or a stranger. He was a boy too, with dreams, with secrets, with laughter that must have echoed somewhere just as mine had. And in that moment, the gap between us closed a little, not completely, but enough for me to imagine that maybe our two stories could one day weave together, not perfectly, not seamlessly, but with threads of truth and effort. And as I listened to him, I realized that marriage, at least for us, would not begin with passion, it would begin with patience. And though patience is harder, patience lasts longer. And I told myself that if I could hold on to patience, then maybe I could also hold on to hope. And as the night carried us forward, with each word shared, with each silence held, I felt less like a prisoner and more like a traveler stepping into a land unknown, with fear, yes, but also with the thrill of discovery. And I thought of how every journey begins not with certainty, but with a single step. And perhaps this, our talking, our listening, was that step. And I wanted to believe that one day, when I looked back, I would see this night not as the night of fear, but as the night of beginnings, the night when two strangers dared to meet not as roles, but as souls. And even though dawn was still far away, I could already feel the faint promise of light somewhere beyond the darkness, whispering that every story, even those not chosen, could still hold beauty if we chose to seek it together. And so as the night slowly surrendered to dawn, as the pale light of morning slipped gently through the curtains and touched the corners of the room, I realized that my fear of the unknown had softened into something else. Not love yet, not certainty, but possibility. And possibility is a powerful thing, because it means that even when life does not give us the story we expected, we still have the chance to write our own chapters within it. We still have the chance to turn a beginning that feels heavy
into a journey that can carry meaning. And as I looked at him, no longer just as the stranger who had become my husband, but as a man who had shared with me his stories, his questions, his patience, I understood that perhaps marriage is not about finding someone you already know, but about learning, about unwrapping the layers of another soul day by day, year by year, until the unknown becomes familiar, and the unfamiliar becomes cherished. And though my first night as a wife had begun with trembling hands and a heart heavy with fear, it ended with the quiet strength I did not know I carried. The strength to see not only what I had lost, but also what I might gain. The strength to believe that, even in situations chosen for us, there is still space to choose kindness, to choose openness.